All right, chapter 15. At the top of 203, benefits of dental x rays. Why do we take dental x rays? We take dental x rays to detect any dental decay in early stages, identify bone loss in early stages, locate any abnormalities in the surrounding hard and soft tissue. So, tumors would be an abnormality. Evaluate growth and development. So, if you took a picture, an x ray of a 6-year-old child, you could see their baby teeth, but you could also see how long it would be until their permanent teeth came in as well. Um, Document the condition of a patient at a specific time. Obtain information during a dental procedure, such as a broken root tip during a oral surgical procedure. Sometimes when he's in the middle of an extraction, he could get the tooth out and pull the tooth out, look at the end of the tooth, and see if it's all there. If not, maybe a piece of the root tip broke. And he would ask you to stop and get an x ray. The definition of an x ray. X ray beams can be defined as weightless bundles of energy, photons, without an electrical charge that travels in waves at the speed of light. So if you took an x ray, you're not going to see it. It travels at the speed of light. The anatomic structure. The basic anatomic structure of matter is important because it directly relates to the waves in which X ray beams are produced. All matter is made up of atoms. Atoms are extremely minute and consist of an inner core and nucleus and have a positive electrical charge. Number of negatively charged particles are called electrons, and they orbit around the nucleus. The nucleus of atoms consists of a positively charged particles called protons. A subatomic particle called neutrons, they have no charge. So the main thing that on state board it's going to ask about is that all matter is made up of what? It's made up of atoms. Numbers of negatively charged particles are called what? Electrons. So those are the main things that they're going to ask on state board. Ionization. Ionization is the harmful effects of an X-ray beam in humans that result in distribution of cellular structure and causes permanent damage to living cells and tissue. When X-ray beams strike a patient's tissue, ionization results. So ionization, it's a state board question. What is ionization? It's the harmful effects of an X-ray beam in humans that we get from radiation. What is a photon? A photon is a minute bundle of pure energy that has no weight or mass. That is a state board question. Similar to visible light, radar, radio, and television waves, X-ray beams belong to a group called electromagnetic radiation. So a radio, A microwave, those are all electronics. Your cell phone, it's electronic. So electromagnetic radiation. So the same type of radiation that we get from cell phones, microwaves, is the same type of radiation that produces X-rays. The shorter the wavelength of radiation, the greater its energy. That is a state board question. No, the shorter the wavelength, the greater its energy. That is the main thing. All right, turn the page. I'm on page 204. Properties of an X-ray. Appearance, it's invisible. Mass, has no weight or mass. Charge, has no charge. Like when you take someone's X-ray, they don't like buzz them. Speed, travels at the speed of light. Path of travel, travels in a straight line but can be deflected or scattered. Focusing ability, cannot be focused. Penetrating ability, penetrates through solids, liquids, and gases. You know, it penetrates through our body. Absorption, can be absorbed by matter. Ionization ability, causes ionization, the harmful effects. Fluorescence, can cause certain substance to glow. You would have to have a lot of exposure to radiation to start to glow. Effect on a film, produces an image. Effect of living tissue, causes biological changes in living cells. And we will talk about that in a minute. So there are types of radiation. There's 3 different types of radiation: primary, secondary, and scattered. Primary radiation is going to go from the tube head directly to the film. Primary radiation. Secondary radiation is the radiation that's going to go around the face, around the head. Scattered radiation goes everywhere. That's why we need to be 6 feet away when we push the exposure button to take an X-ray. That's why we put a lead apron on our patient, is to protect us as an employee and the patient from scattered radiation. Page 205. Just as distance can be measured in miles or kilometers, time can be measured in hours and minutes. Radiation is also measured. It is measured 2 different ways. The newer system is known as System International, the SI system, and the older system is called Roentgen, RADS or RENS, the traditional system. So when I think of the way they used to measure it in the traditional system, I think of traditions. And so the traditional is measured in Roentgens. Well, Mr. William Roentgen is the man that invented X-rays. And I don't know if y'all remember me telling you the story about when he was inventing X-rays, he was holding it and radiation kept hitting his hand, and it was exposed to too much radiation, and he had to have his hand amputated. It rotted off. So I think of Mr. Rottingen. He invented x-rays. So rads and rents. But he was from a long time ago. So I think about traditions in your family that have been passed down from years and years and years. So that makes me think of knowing that that's the older system. The newer system, how I remember the newer system is System International, that it's measured in silvers and grays, is because I think of Happy New Year and you throw glitter or one of the, some kind of confetti or whatever, and it's silver. Happy New Year. And so that's what how I remember that silvers and grays are measured in the newer system, System International. Radiation exposure. The term radiation exposure refers to the amount of radiation to which a person is exposed and is measured in XSI units. The traditional term is the Rottingen. Absorbed dose. The amount of radiation energy actually absorbed by the tissue is known as the absorbed dose. On state board, when it's asking about absorbed dose, it's basically going to give you the answer because it's going to mention what is the amount of radiation energy actually absorbed by the tissue called absorbed dose. Dose equivalent. Dose equivalent measurement is used to compare the biological effects or different types of radiation. So 1 rem would equal 0.1 silver, or 1 silver would equal 100 rem. It would be the dose equivalent. And its dose equivalent is used to compare the biological effects. Biological effects would be what would be harmful, what you would pass down to your kids and your kids pass down to their kids, biological effects. Radiation hazard protection. We are exposed to radiation every day of our lives. Background radiation comes from natural sources such as radioactive material in the ground and cosmic radiation from space. That is known as background radiation. And you will have patients that will ask you, well, I heard x-rays are bad for you, so I don't want to take, I don't want any x-rays. I heard they're bad for you. What I tell my patients is you get more radiation standing in the sun for 5 minutes than you do from getting x-rays. And that's the truth. Especially now that everybody is using digital x-rays, you get even less radiation using digital x-rays than you used to when we used traditional film. But you do. You get more radiation from the sun in 5 minutes than you do from an x-ray. Two important concepts are basic to radiation protection. The first is the concept of maximal permissible dose, and the second is the ALRA principle. The maximum permissible dose, MPD, is the exposure limit for those who are occupationally exposed to radiation. It means How much radiation can we have in a year? 1 year. If you turn the page to page 206, it's going to tell you. So at the very top of 206, the MPD, maximal permissible dose, and that's what that stands for. And it's going to say MPD. It's not going to say maximal permissible dose on state board. You need to know what MPD stands for. For the whole body, exposure for an occupationally exposed person for 1 year in dental is 0.05 SV silver or 5 rem. That's how much we can get in 1 year. For a pregnant person, it's even less. They're only going to ask about someone that's not pregnant, working in the dental field, taking x-rays though. But for a pregnant person, it would be 0.005 silver and 0.5 rem per year. All right. ALRA principle. The ALRA principle states that all exposure to radiation must be kept as low as reasonably achievable. So on state board, it will ask you, what does ALRA principle stand for? As low as reasonably achievable. Meaning you're not going to take unnecessary x-rays if you don't have to. You want to take the minimum. So biological effects of radiation. The effects of radiation may not become evident for many years after the time when the x-ray beams were absorbed by the body. And that time, the lag time, is called the latent period. So, I've been doing this 25 years. And have I been exposed to radiation? Was I accidentally in the room when someone took x-rays? And over the years, I'm sure it's happened. I'm not showing any effects. So that's known as the latent period. But, years down the road, I might start getting a twitch. Who knows? So, but the latent period, basically it's any effects that you were got from being exposed to radiation aren't showing up. So look at the bottom of 206 and sensitivity to radiation for cell types or tissue. There's high, fairly high, medium, fairly low, and low. So I mentioned before, whenever we take x-rays on a patient, we will be 6 feet away, pushing the button to expose the x-ray, and we'll put a lead apron on the patient. The lead apron on state board, it will say, what does the lead apron need to have on it? It needs to have what's called a thyroid collar. This is your thyroid right here. And it needs to have a thyroid collar. Now, on state board, it's going to ask, what are the most sensitive cells and tissue to radiation? If you look at this table, thyroid is on here, but it's under fairly low. So Do not be that girl. Do not be that guy. Pick anything but thyroid. If it's asking about what is the most sensitive cells and tissue to radiation, the only time you need to pick thyroid on the state board test is when it's asking about the lead apron and that you need a thyroid color. That is the only time. Okay, so pick anything but thyroid. But let's look at what is fairly high. Bone marrow, reproductive cells, intestinal mucosa, the lining of your stomach, skin, the lens of your eyes. It might even say something like optical, your eyes, oral mucosa, the lining of your mouth, and small lymphatic, your small lymph nodes. Those are all high. So if it says, and it will give you A, B, C, and D to choose from. And it's always going to have thyroid. Don't pick it. Pick anything but that for sensitivity for cells and tissue to radiation. All right. Cumulative effects. Exposure to radiation has a cumulative effect, meaning it builds up over a lifetime. If you went and laid out in the sun every single day for an hour, you would get cumulative effects. Your skin would look like leather. You would have wrinkles. You would get the effects of the sun, cumulative effects. Acute radiation exposure occurs when a large dose of radiation is absorbed in a short time, such as a nuclear accident. A bomb goes off, which these days and age, it's very scary to think that that could happen. But if a bomb went off in the U.S., that would be considered acute radiation, short time. Chronic radiation exposure occurs when small amounts of radiation are absorbed over a long period of time. So we can go back to cumulative effects. So the radiation that you get from the sun, you're laying out in the sun every day over a long period of time for years, you'll eventually get cumulative effects. So genetic and somatic effects. Down below are pictures of dogs. One dog looks healthy. One dog looks kind of, punier, not as healthy looking. So X-ray exposure affects both genetic and somatic cells. Genetic cells are the reproductive cells. Your sperm, ova. Damage to genetic cells is passed on to succeeding generations. So, for instance, I had a baby. My baby was fine, right? But then, my daughter has a daughter. Her daughter might come out with 10 fingers. Anybody go, wait, I have 10 fingers. Anybody do that? Yeah, we're supposed to have 10 fingers. Okay. I know, this is boring, I know, but there's no way to make this exciting, guys. Sorry. It is what it is. But it's the hardest part of state board. One of the hardest parts. Jurisprudence is the other, but radiation, x-rays, the hardest. So that's my one little joke. Sorry. Yes, we're supposed to have 10 fingers. They might have like maybe a little extra finger or something, a genetic effect. All cells in the body belong to a group of somatic tissue. Somatic means referring to the body. X-ray exposure they can damage somatic tissues. And it can cause somatic changes, but it is not passed on to future generations. All right. Um, I am going to, okay, let's go to page 207. Let's kind of finish this up. Although the radiation dose for reproductive cells from dental x-rays is very small, every patient must wear a lead apron with a thyroid collar. Stay bored. Who prescribes the x-rays? The dentist. He doesn't write out a prescription. He just says, hey, go take a FMX on Miss Jones for me. X-rays are the dentist owns the x-rays. Patients can have copies of the x-rays, but they can never have the original. But they can have copies of the x-rays. If another office wants the x-rays, now everything's digital. Email, that is a state board question too. Email x-rays. All right. All right. I am going to stop there, guys, and we'll pick up next video. Okay. So for chapter 15, I'm at on page 207, prescribing x-rays. So the dentist is the one that is responsible for prescribing the x-rays. He owns the x-rays. Patients can have copies, but they can never have the original. The reason why we might need to duplicate x-rays is if the patient moves to another state and wants copies of their x-rays. They change insurance, and their insurance, we no longer take their insurance, and they have to find another dental office that does. If they are going to have any type of surgery, like wisdom teeth extractions, we would send copies of their x-rays to the specialist. So those can be emailed. You just hit send. Used to, it was a pain in the butt to make copies of x-rays, duplicate x-rays. Now we just hit send. All right. So fast speed film. With conventional film, traditional film, F speed film is the fastest. F for fast. There are 5 speeds: A, B, C, D, E, and F. F is the fastest. In the real world, we would use D film just because it wasn't as expensive as F speed film. But state board, F speed film is the fastest. If you look at a film, there's little crystals on there. And the size of the crystals determines the speed of the film. They're real sensitive. So the larger the crystals, the faster the speed of film. With digital x-rays, we don't need as much radiation. So exposure time for digital x-rays are 70 to 80% less than required for conventional film. That's a lot. 70 to 80% less radiation needed for digital films. That's a lot. That's good. So the tube head, the beautiful little tube head. Inside this tube head, and of course I have show and tell. Give me 1 second. Ta-da, my tube head. So inside your tube head, so this whole thing is the tube head, right? And then it's connected to an extension arm, and then the control panels on the wall. So this little guy right here, this tubing, is your PID, position indicator device, because it positions the beam to where it's going to go to the film. So inside, if you look, it looks like a rectangle. That is known as the collimator. It can either be a rectangle or it can be a circle, the collimator. And what does the collimator do? It restricts the size and the shape of the X-ray beam. And I'm kind of jumping ahead because on page 207, it's asking about filtration, the purpose of the aluminum filter. So behind this collimator that I'm talking about that restricts the size and the shape, behind it, right back in here, is a filter. And a filter, like an air filter, any kind of filter, it's filtering out things, right? A coffee filter. We don't want grinds in our coffee. So the filter, what it does, it filters out long wavelengths and low energy x-rays from the x-ray beam. That is a state board question. Now turn the page. This is when I jumped ahead and it was talking about my lovely friend, the collimator. And the collimator restricts the size and the shape of the x-ray beam. Now, it can be a circle or it could be a rectangle. They say the rectangle shape is the best shape because it reduces the size of the x-ray beam to a number, the size of a number 2 film. So one of you might get a question about what is the best shape for the collimator? Rectangle. One of you might get a question about what does the collimator do? It restricts the size and the shape of the x-ray beam. Okay? All right. So again, going back to my tube, this is known as your position indicator device, PID. PID. I could make up a song, but I won't. PID. I don't know. There you go. Position indicator device. It aims the x-ray beam at the film in the patient's mouth. They say the longer the better. 16 inches is the long one. A shorter one would be 8 inches, but the 16 inches is longer the better. All right. The lead apron. It's the apron that the patient wears, and it has a thyroid collar, also known as a cervical collar. And it will probably use the word cervical collar, is known as a thyroid collar. All right, page 210. Radiation monitoring. It shows a little badge, and I haven't ever seen until recently a dental office that had their staff wear this badge. But the badge, it just tells you how much radiation you're getting exposed to. Because you can only have, and for 1 year, so for an occupationally exposed uh, person taking dental x-rays, we can only get 0.05 silverts or 5 rem a year. So that little badge monitors that. All right. Components of a dental x-ray machine. You have your control panel that's on the wall. You have your tube head. You have your PID. You have an extension arm. So 3 primary components: tube head, extension arm, control panel. Those are the 3 primary components. Now, inside your tube head, you have a cathode and you have an anoid. If you want to look at the top of page 211, it will show you the inside of a tube head, and it points to the anoid and the cathode. The cathode produces high-speed electrons. The cathode produces the high-speed electrons. And then the anoid acts as the target for the high-speed electrons. So target is going to be the key word there. Target, anoid. So make sure that you know the difference between cathode and anoid, because you will get one's going to get a question about anoid, someone's going to get a question about cathode. So make sure that you know the difference. Then you have a filter. There's a picture of a collimator and a filter on page 211. The oil in the x-ray tube absorbs approximately 99% of energy generated by the process, and the energy is given off as heat. The remaining 1% exists in the tube head. The center portion of the x-ray beam is known as a central ray or primary beam. Think of primary radiation. The primary radiation goes where? Directly to the film. Remember, secondary radiation is around the head. Scattered radiation is everywhere. So primary beam is your primary radiation. It's going directly to the film. What does the filter do? The filter removes low energy, long wavelength x-ray beams that can be absorbed by the patient, but are not necessary for producing x-rays. All right, on page 212. So the control panel, it's going to be on the wall. Okay, it's going to be on the wall, and it's going to have an off and on button. It's going to have a dial. and or buttons, and there'll be a picture of a man, a woman, and a child, typically. And then you'll have your button that you push that it goes or beep to take the button, your exposure timer. So you turn it on, and then if you have a giant, extremely large person, you're going to need more radiation to penetrate through that body. So this is when you will change the setting, your settings on your control panel, your MA setting and your KV selector and your MA selector. The MA selector controls the number of electrons produced. The KV, your kilovoltage selector, is used to control the penetrating power and the quality of an X-ray. So when I think of my MA selector, what does it control? The number of electrons. Milliamperage. I don't know. I look at that and I think of miles. Like, how many miles did I run? Like numbers. KV, I think of like getting shocked, like Frankenstein. Penetrating power to cause someone to voltage. I don't know if that helps. Y'all can think of other little ways. I always try to give you little things that help me, but y'all sometimes are really good at coming up with your own little sayings and things to help you remember things as well. So, but say you had a child, you're not going to need as much radiation to penetrate through a child. So those buttons that you see that would be a man, a woman, a child, you would push the child, and that automatically will change the KV selector and the MA selector. So y'all remember when I said when you look at an X-ray, you're going to see different shades of grays and darks, white. So contrast. Contrast are all the multiple shades of grays and darks and whites that you see on an X-ray. But when an X-ray goes from gray to white, it's known as radio opaque. Think of an opal, the birthstone for October. It's white and it's got little shimmeries in it. Radio opaque. Think of an opal. Radiolucent is when X-rays go from gray to dark. Well, I think of Lucifer, the devil. He's dark. So if you can remember Lucifer, the devil, he's dark, radiolucent, then you know radio opaque is gray to white. Radiolucent, gray to dark. Contrast is controlled by the KV selector. Y'all, contrast, think of, I don't know, multiple shades of gray and in between, like 50 shades of gray. Density is the overall blackness or darkness of an X-ray. The MA setting controls the density. Image distortion is influenced by object film distance, source film distance, and movement. So if I went to go take a picture of somebody and they moved and they were running and I went to take a picture, their picture is going to come out looking blurry. Okay? Same thing with an X-ray. You tell a patient to stay still, they move, the X-ray is going to come out blurry. Object film distance describes the distance between the teeth, which is the object, being x-rayed, and the film. So here's my cute little makeshift film. Here's my tooth. The film needs to be close to the teeth. So that's object film distance. The film being closest to the teeth. We don't want the film to be away from the teeth. We want it to be close to the teeth. Now, source film distance. Here's my x-ray holder. Okay. So my film is going to be in here. This is going to be in the mouth. Here's my ring. Okay. If I'm far away, my x-ray is not going to turn out as nicely as if I was closer. Source film distance. Think of a picture. If you went to take a picture of someone and they were across the room and you took a picture and then they came and they were standing right in front of you, what picture is going to show up better? The one when they're right there, closer to you. So, source film distance. All right. Ta-da. That's chapter 15. Now let's go on to 16. Guys, I know this is boring. I'm so sorry. I try to have show and tell. I try to make really bad jokes. Hey, at least I'm sort of entertaining. Okay, yeah. All right, there are 3 different types of interoral. Enter into the mouth. Interoral, inside the mouth. Views. You have a periapical, which is a single x-ray, and that's going to show the crown all the way to the end of the apex. Bite wing, which shows both the crown of the maxilla and mandible on one film. And then you have occlusal, which where you would take a size 2 film and have them bite down on it. Your periapical on state board, it will give you a picture of an x-ray and it will ask you to tell them what x-ray it is, what view it is. Is it a PA view? Is it a bite wing? Or is it an occlusal? Okay. So, film pack. When you open up a film pack, you have your outer wrapper, lead foil, black paper, and your film. Now, your lead foil, 2 things that the lead foil does. One, it helps absorb the X-ray, the radiation from the X-ray beam. That's what the foil does. And also, if I took a film packet, and guys, remember, the white side of the film will always face your PID. White side of the film always faces your PID. If I put it in my mouth backwards, improper placement of film, what is that going to cause? And that's what it would say. And that's how it would be worded on state board. Improper placement of film causes what effect? The herringbone effect. And that on your lead foil looks like tire tracks. So it would look like tire tracks on an x-ray. And that's known as the herringbone effect. Alrighty. How many sizes of film? 5. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 0 would be for kids. Kids bite wings. Size 1, anterior teeth only for adults. Size 2 for posterior PAs and bite wings, and for kids' occlusal x-rays. Size 3, I've never seen in my life. I've never used it. I've been doing this 25 years. Never seen it. You wouldn't ever use a size 3. A size 4, I have used in the past, way in the past, way in the past. And it was about this size, and you would lay it on for an adult. A size 4 film was for an adult, and you would just lay it on their front teeth and have them kind of close down on it like you do for kids for a cookie x-ray. But panoramic x-rays took the place of size 4 film. So you will only be using in real life in your dental offices 0, 1, and 2 size films. All right. Never leave film out in the open so they can be exposed to scattered radiation. Because if you leave film out in the room, a whole brand new package of film, and it's getting exposed to scattered radiation, when you finally went to use the new film that you just left sitting out, when you developed it, it would look foggy. It would look foggy, and that's known as film fog, and that's caused from scattered radiation. How can you tell if your film is fogged? From a coin test. A coin test. And a coin test is used for a safe light. The safe light is that enough light that gives you enough illumination in the dark room. So what a coin test is you would take a nickel and you would lay the nickel on an unopened film that was exposed to scattered radiation, and then turn on the safe light, turn the safe light off, open up the film in the darkroom, develop it. If the image of the coin comes off on the film, that means that it was exposed to scattered radiation. So, turn the page. Alrighty. Intraoral oil. Oh boy, excuse me, tongue tied. Intraoral x-ray techniques. You have paralleling technique, periapical views, or up to, okay, so 2 basic techniques for a periapical view: the paralleling technique and bisecting technique. Paralleling technique excuse me. The tube head is parallel to the long axis of the teeth, and the x-ray beam is directed at right angles to the film of the long axis of the tooth. That is paralleling technique. If they are asking about bisecting technique, it's going to mention something in the question about a triangle. A triangle. If it's wanting bisecting technique, it's going to ask something about a triangle. And the way it would be worded is, hold on, let me find it. The bisecting angle technique is based on a geometric principle of bisecting a triangle. So, if you see triangle, pick bisecting. when we take x-rays, always make sure the patient is sitting straight up in their chair. If your patient says that they are a gagger, and your patients are real good, they'll say, "Oh, I'm a gagger." They'll let you know, and you'll be like, "Thanks for the heads up." Seriously. If they are gaggers, when you start to take a FMX, and this is a state board question, start with the anterior teeth. Start with anterior teeth if your patient is a gagger. Why? Because the minute you put something in the back and they start gagging, game over. It's in their head. Once they start gagging, they're not going to stop. So start with the anterior teeth first with the FMX. All right. So what are these beautiful things called? There's a red one, a blue one, and a yellow one. Turn to page 220. So your red one are for bite wings, where you're seeing both the crown of the maxilla and the mandible on one film. Remember, if you bite someone hard enough, they're going to bleed red. Bite wing. The blue is anterior XCP or REN. Anterior, I think of an anteater, that animal, and he's got the long nose on the front of his face. That's how I remember anterior, anteater. And then the yellow. The yellow is the posterior x-rays. And guys, I know it sounds crazy, but my derriere, it's in the back there where the sun don't shine and the sun is yellow. Posterior. And yeah, see? I know. I try. Okay. Point of entry is the position on the patient's face, which the central x-ray beam is aimed. The goal is to cover the film completely with the completely with the beam of radiation. So if you're PID, it needs to be directly over the film. If it wasn't, it would cause a circular kind of a clear image in the film, and that's known as cone cutting. You'll know when they're asking about cone cutting because they will refer to it as a crescent moon shape. What causes a crescent moon shape? Cone cutting. All right, so point of entry, where it's directly going to the patient's face. You have your horizontal vertical angulation, only used for bite wings. Vertical angulation, vertical, is for posterior or anterior for periapicals. Bite wing x-rays will always be horizontal. And that's so we can see in between the teeth. They might use the word interproximal, meaning in between the teeth. The horizontal angulation will get that. All right. Now, on page 221, it talks about vertical angulation is too steep or vertical angulation is too flat. One person will get a question about elongation. One person will get a question about foreshortening. If I'm supposed to be here with my tube head and my PID, if I am tilted too much like this is too much vertical angulation. My teeth on the x-ray, the roots, are going to look really short. Now, if my vertical angulation was supposed to be like this, and I'm too flat, my teeth are going to look super long, the roots, and it's called elongation. So you better know the difference between too much vertical angulation or too less vertical angulation. Which is which? Make a little rhyme up in your head. Something. All right. On page 223, it's talking about a full mouth x-ray. It will ask you how many x-rays on state board. It will ask you how many x-rays make up a FMX. Your book says anywhere from 10 to 18. FMX will never go over 21 x-rays. So if it gives you, and it, because it's multiple choice state board. So if it gives you the option of 12 to 22, that's not the right answer. It will never go over 21 x-rays, and it will never go less than 10. So if they give you an option 9 to 18, that's not right. So make the best management decision off the numbers that they give you. But just know never less than 10, never over 21 x-rays for an FMX. So an FMX is better than a pano because it shows the teeth in more detail. But it's less radiation to take a pano. A pano is one that goes all the way around the head. Now, it's not on a state board question, but FMX's insurance will only pay once every 5 years. I think that's still correct. That insurance will only pay for a FMX once every 5 years. But some offices will do 4 bite wings and a pano and call that a FMX too. All right. So remember for bite wings, I said you would use horizontal angulation. But if you're a little off to the left or you're not exactly horizontal, it can cause the teeth to look overlapped where you can't see in between the teeth. And that is a state board question. Correct horizontal angulation is critical to diagnostic value of bite wing views. Even a slight amount of overlapping of the proximal, meaning the contact surfaces of the image, may lead to misdiagnosis, overlapping. All right, turn the page. I know what, guys, this is. No way, no. Yeah. This is why state board, this is the hardest part of state board, x-rays. Occlusal technique. Now, do you see where it says occlusal technique? The occlusal technique is used to determine large areas of the upper and lower jaw. The occlusal technique is so named because the patient bites or occludes on the entire film. A number 4 is used for adults, and number 2 is used for kids. That last sentence right there, this is what would make or break your question and your answer, whether you got it right or wrong on state board. Those ors, the ands, the nots. So the occlusal technique is used when large areas of the maxilla or is the key word, mandible, must be x-rayed, radiographed. And that's how it will be worded on state board. It will say the occlusal technique is used when large areas of the maxilla or mandible is seen on an x-ray. And it will ask you what kind of x-ray. and you would pick occlusal if it said or, the maxilla or mandible. Now, what if it said and? What if it said what x-ray would show the mandible and the maxilla on one film? It would be a pano. So the ands and the ors, really watch out for those because it makes the answer either right or wrong. I cannot stress that enough. Okay. Vertical angulation for an occlusal technique, and it's a weird state board question, but it is 35 to 65 degrees. 35 to 65 degrees. Infection control. So whenever we used to have to take the traditional film and we had to go to a dark room, we would carry the film in a plastic or paper cup to the dark room. That's how you transport contaminated x-rays. So when I got to the dark room, then I was going to develop my x-rays. What is the first solution that my x-rays would go into? It would be, I'm developing an x-ray, so the developer solution. What does the developer solution do? It softens the emulsion that's on the film. And then it's rinsed. Then it would go into the fixer solution, the film. What does the fixer solution do? The fixer solution removes the unexposed silver halide crystals and creates white to clear areas on an x-ray. After the films have been fixed, they are thoroughly washed. If they are not washed, and this is a question on state board, if your x-rays aren't washed, like the fixer solution or the developer solution isn't completely rinsed off of the x-ray, over time the x-ray will turn brown. It look ugly. Yeah. Ugly. It will have brown spots if it's not washed good. All right. So turn the page. Now, state board is tricky. Tricky. I've seen on there where it asks a question. When developing a digital x-ray, what temperature does the developer solution need to be? It doesn't. You're developing a digital x-ray. You use the computer. It doesn't use any solution. So slow down and really read the questions. Okay. So on page 226, it talks about manual processing, hand dipping. I mean, this was how they developed x-rays and time began. We had to do it by hand. And they had these tanks, and they had a lid to the tank. And you always had to keep, and that's a state board question, the lids always have to stay on the tanks if it is manual processing by hand. Manual means by hand. And the solution temperature, though, for manual was 68 degrees. And time in the solution, it took 2 minutes to hand dip it in the developer solution. Then you rinsed it with water. Then you dipped it in the fixer solution. You rinsed it with water. The hand dipping took 2 minutes. It took 45 minutes to hang it up so it could dry. 45 minutes to air dry, but 2 minutes to hand dip it. And it was 68 degrees. And it always had to have a lid. All right. An automatic film processor. And there is a picture of it on 227. I showed y'all the daylight loader upstairs, very similar to that, just it's in the dark room. The temperature for the developer in an automatic processor is 85 degrees to 105 degrees. And it took 4 to 6 minutes. 4 to 6 minutes. So make sure when you're reading these questions, is it asking about manual, automatic, or digital? Duplicating x-rays, we talked about this, why we would need to duplicate an x-ray. If the patient moved, they were going to see a specialist, we would send over the x-rays. If we had to have a traditional film and we had to duplicate it in the dark room, the longer the duplicating film was exposed to light, because that's what we would do, we would turn on a light and then turn it off, and that's how we would duplicate. The darker the film would be. Did I read that right? No. This is opposite. The x-ray film will become darker when exposed to light. Let me start from the beginning. We're duplicating film with traditional film. The longer the duplicating film is exposed to light, the lighter the duplicating film will become. Thank you. My apologies. Okay. What is white light? White light is when the door to the dark room is not completely closed. Like you can look at the door when you're in the dark room, and if you see light coming in from the creases of the doorway, then you know that's white light, and that will ruin your x-rays. Because if I took an x-ray, here's my film, I open it up and the light, when I went to go develop my film, it's going to come out black. It was overexposure to light. So when mounting an x-ray, you have that beautiful little braille dot on your film, on your traditional film. It feels like braille. Pimp out, people. Pimple, not dimple. So when you're mounting your film, that embossed dot is going to face you. Pimp out. What is the purpose of the embossed dot? To determine the right and the left side of the mouth when mounting your x-rays in an x-ray mount. Alrighty. Exposure time for digital x-rays are 50 to 80% less than required by using conventional film. So there are two different types of digital film. You have your phosphor plates and you have sensors. Now, they're not going to say sensors on state board, and they're not going to say phosphor plates on state board. They're going to use their abbreviations, and it would be CCD or PSP. Okay, they're talking digital film here. So the CDC is an image receptor, the charge coupler device. That's what the CCD stands for. The image is recorded on a sensor instead of film. It plugs into a USB port in the computer. Electronic impulses is what allows the computer to produce the image on the screen. Now your phosphor, and it shows up like that. When you use sensors, you take that x-ray, it pops up just like that. So if your x-ray looks like poop, hit delete. Just take it again. I love digital x-rays. All right. Phosphor plates, PSP. They are thin, flexible plate, the size and the shape of conventional film, but it's been coated with phosphor crystals. During exposure, the PSP absorbs this and stores the electrons from the X-ray beam and releases the energy as light. It's a latent image that's on the phosphor plates. So when you go to stick them into the machine, the image will pop up, but the light will automatically erase the image on the phosphor plates. They're reusable. And that's what a latent image is. So if I use traditional film, I took an x-ray on my patient. A tornado was coming. I couldn't develop my film. I just put it on the counter and ran. Well, the next day, the tornado didn't get me. I come back in. There's an image on the film. I can't see it. That's known as the latent image. But then I go and develop my film. Now I can see the image. Yay, tornado didn't get me. Okay. All righty. Anytime that you use the digital film, whether it's a sensor or the phosphor plates, you always, always have to put a protective barrier because they are reused. So on the sensor, it's going to be like a plastic sleeve between each patient. Put a clean barrier on there. You would not put it in the autoclave. It's like putting your cell phone in the oven. You just disinfect it. That's why we use barriers. For a pano, it will ask on state board when developing a panoramic x-ray, how is the image produced? The image is produced on an intensifying screen. Intensifying screen, a pano is. It also is going to ask about the unit itself where we put the film in. The film will slide into a narrow slit. It will mention a narrow slit. It will be talking about the panoramic x-ray or the panoramic, and the film slides into a narrow slit. But how is the image produced? On an intensifying screen. Now, whenever someone is getting a pano, make sure that you tell them to take off their jewelry because it will show up in the pano. Yeah. If they're wearing hoops, hoop, 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 hoop it up. Yep. All right. Always make documentation. Any X-rays that you take, no matter what type it is, whether it's 4 bite wings, whether it's a pano, whether it's a FMX, you always have to put that in the patient's chart. Okay. And like I said, the dentist owns the X-rays. Patients can never have the original. And guys, I can't believe it. We got through it. Yay. All right. If you have any questions, call me. Bye.